Now, with our top story at this hour, starting with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky warning President Trump that Vladimir Putin is, quote, bluffing about being open to peace ahead of Friday's high-stakes summit between the United States and Russia. Of course, it's happening, as you know, in Alaska. Now, Zelensky meeting virtually with the president and European leaders earlier today, saying that lasting peace cannot be secured without Ukraine at the negotiating table. In the meantime, President is offering his own recap of the meeting. He says that he had a, quote, very good call with Zelensky and regional allies. The president going on to say that a second meeting with Zelensky, Putin himself, could happen almost immediately after Friday's summit. When asked, though, if Russia would face any consequences if Putin does not agree to stop the war, this is how the president answered.
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
there will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences, yes.
Well, joining me now for ABC News is the State Department reporter Shannon Kingston, along with ABC News' Patrick Reevell from our London bureau. Good to be with you both here. And Patrick, we know Zelensky essentially outlined, right, what he called common principles for negotiations on this call that he had. So what is he looking for here, Patrick?
Hi, Kana. Yeah, I mean, President Trump, the European leaders, and President Zelensky were all very positive about this call. They basically presented a united front, and both President Zelensky and these European leaders said they had put forward basically 5 red lines, 5 principles that they said President Trump had agreed with going into this summit. The first is that there must be a ceasefire before any meaningful peace talks will continue. The second was that Ukraine must be part of any future negotiations. The third was that Ukraine will negotiate territory, meaning not the United States will be doing that, and that the starting point will be from the present front line, meaning what Russia already holds, not what it has been demanding it get. The fourth point was that Ukraine needs solid security guarantees and that the U.S. will be part of that somehow. And then the fifth point was that more sanctions will be imposed on Russia if it does not agree to something in Alaska, if there is no result from Alaska. And, you know, we heard President Trump appear to back that up, saying that there will be severe consequences for Russia if nothing comes out of the summit. But I think it is interesting what we're seeing here is basically the U.S. and European countries trying to box in Vladimir Putin and trying to basically test him and say that if you are serious about peace, you must accept a ceasefire, you must move towards that at this summit, or there will be consequences, you will face more pressure. And it is interesting that for once now, European countries and Ukraine and the Trump administration appear for the time being to be on the same page, though, of course, everything could become very different once President Trump is in the room with Vladimir Putin, Kana.
Certainly, although appearances do matter as they head into this. Shannon, what do we know in terms of the ceasefire, as Patrick laid out there? How does the White House, how does the president feel about that going into the summit?
Well, they're setting it as a priority, and they're also trying to build up some leverage ahead of the meeting with Vladimir Putin. It was very interesting to hear the president's public comments. As you mentioned, Kana, he's promising severe consequences if Vladimir Putin doesn't agree to those terms. So clearly trying to flex a little bit of muscle here. We also know that preparations have been ongoing because even though the president does like to go off script sometimes, his teams are working to carefully manage, carefully coordinate every detail ahead of Friday's summit. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Trump's national security advisor called his Russian counterpart. Really, and the purpose of that conversation was to set the tone going forward and to set some of the ground rules. So clearly we have some of this playing out in public and the other half very much playing out behind closed doors.
No question. Patrick laid out the 5 things Ukraine is looking for here, though. So, Shannon, what other issues might Trump address with Putin outside of just the ceasefire? And do you also think that that actual trilateral meeting, right, between Putin, Zelensky, and himself, the president, could actually happen after this?
Well, Kana, we do know that the president mentioned he might bring up some cybersecurity issues with Putin. We also expect it's possible that Putin might try to distract the president from the agenda at hand by bringing up some business proposals. But Trump, for his part, has said that the priority here very much is setting up that trilateral meeting, trying to get Putin and Zelensky in the same room to hash all of this out. But, Kana, it is worth remembering that the Trump administration has been trying to do just that, get these two leaders in one room for months, but Russia has again and again rebuffed those efforts.
Certainly. All right, Shannon and Patrick, our thanks to both of you. And for more analysis, I want to bring in our ABC News contributor and former U.S. ambassador to NATO, retired Lieutenant General Doug Lute. General, thank you for being here with us. And first, I guess I'd love to just get your perspective here on what you think the possible likelihood is of an actual trilateral meeting following the summit.
Well, I think we'll know a lot more after Friday's meeting in Alaska. But frankly, I don't think the prospects are great for the three parties coming together. And that's because their objectives are so dramatically different. For Ukraine and the Western European allies, this is all about Ukraine's sovereignty, Ukraine's ability to choose its own path in the future with regard to its leadership, its constitution, membership in the EU and NATO, and so forth. For Putin, it's exactly the opposite. It's about Russia controlling Ukraine and denying Ukrainian sovereignty. And for Trump, he's looking for a quick win. He's looking for a transactional exchange that presents him as the peacemaker. So these different perspectives across different timelines suggest that it's going to be very hard to come to common ground.
Well, so we know the president has promised severe consequences, right, if Russia does not end the war in Ukraine. What would it take here to get Putin's attention? As you have noted here, the deadline of August 8th, has passed.
Right. I mean, we shouldn't forget that there was a deadline. There was an ultimatum by President Trump that in 2 weeks, this was some weeks ago, in 2 weeks, severe consequences would be imposed on Russia. And of course, that deadline was last Friday. So we've sped past that by way of scheduling the summit this Friday. I think the most severe consequence, those meaning consequence on Putin and on the Kremlin, would be for Trump to follow through on secondary sanctions on the two major countries that import Russian oil. And these, of course, are China and India. And of course, here, Trump's attempt to get a win in Ukraine may intersect and even be in conflict with his trade agenda. So that's really, I think, the rub for the Trump administration.
We know that Zelensky, during his virtual meeting, called for further pressure, including European sanctions. It sounds like, at least from our State Department reporting here and our other reporters, that right now European leaders in the United States and Ukraine at least seem to be on the same page. So do you see that happening?
Yeah, I think this is a huge step and very smart on the part of European leaders, our NATO allies, and Zelensky. Because in effect, with the meeting today with President Trump and laying out the principles that your journalists, your reporters have noted, laying those out means that they've preempted the Alaska summit in a very important way. So they've gotten in front of it, and I think that's very important.
What's your take on the so-called land swapping, though, right? We know the president has alluded to that, and it sounds like Zelensky, in his 5-point plan here, discussed that as well, but he wants Ukraine to negotiate territory, which, of course, has to be approved by the people as well, and that he wants the starting line to be, where it was, not where Russia has gained.
Well, first of all, the Ukrainian constitution takes this decision back to the Ukrainian parliament and the Ukrainian people. So if there's any exchange of sovereign Ukrainian territory, this is beyond President Zelensky's ability to actually do that swapping. And therefore, it's well beyond the American president to do anything like that as well. But look, fundamentally, even for Putin, this is not about land. This is not about marginal gains on the battlefield. This is about Putin's objective to control Ukraine in a very fundamental way, to make Ukraine subservient to the Kremlin. So this is bigger than land.
Certainly. As retired Lieutenant General Doug Lute, we always appreciate your time and insight. Thank you.